The latest season of My Hero Academia is probably the peak season of the show for me. And that's because it gets rid of all that fodder, all the training that they go through, all the arcs of just straight on talking about what's to come. It's finally came in this arc. Maybe that's a little weird usage of the word, but everything that's been built up to is basically pinnacle in this arc finally. So we finally get to see a lot of action from a lot of different characters. But for some reason, they leave out one of my best boys, man, and who I think could be one of the strongest characters in the show ever. And that is based on sort of a technicality. And that guy is none other than one of the top 3 students in all of UA. And no, I'm not talking about Lemillion. Sadly, I'm not talking about Nejiri either, who's also pretty sweet. But I want to focus on Tamaki Amajiki, otherwise known as the Sun Eater. His quirk is called Manifest. And according to the definition of the quirk, it's the ability to manifest any characteristics of whatever he consumes. And that basically means anything. They're allowed to do any characteristic of anything that he consumes. So we're just straight off the bat, we're just lucky that this guy has a moral compass and wants to be a hero and is very heroic in the sense. Because if he just decided to be a flat out villain, he could really do some damage with this quirk. And let me bring up a few points as to why that is also as broken as it sounds. During one of his best moments in the show, which is the Yakuza raid, he fights off 3 of the 8 bullets of Hasai all by himself. So these guys are basically the top henchmen, and he takes on 3 of them at the same time in order to let the others escape. And these 3 guys, although they're technically Class C type heroes, them 3 working together is a pretty deadly combination. So let's just go over the 3 quirks that these guys actually had, which are kind of broken when you put them all together in the sense of teamwork that they use. The first quirk I'm going to talk about is called Larceny. And basically larceny was the ability to steal anything from the opponent that they're wearing. So it's basically stealing all of his defense away from him, that he usually uses those muscles for defense for the shells. The next person is the guy with the quirk Crystallize. Basically Diamond Head, if you want that to be what you want to call it, from Ben 10. I mean, his quirk is the ability to turn his skin into crystals. Very hard to penetrate. Pretty tough to fight against, probably in a 1v1 situation in general. But the last quirk is an interesting one because it was basically a counter, I would say, to his quirk directly in a way. Like it wouldn't have worked that well against anyone else, I guess. But the guy had the quirk called Food, which is basically the ability to consume anything that his mouth touches. And of course, he was a fucking psychopath that just runs around with his mouth open, trying to chew everything. So these 3, he was fighting them off at the same time, by the way. And they are a team, a unit that has been together for a long time. As you can see, they say that they like to call themselves trash. But even as trash, they're bonded together because they're still a team. So they had pretty good teamwork. So it was a 3v1 situation, which is essentially banking in a way. Like he was getting banked, he was getting jumped. But he was able to develop a battle strategy to be able to beat all 3 of them and shut them down essentially all at once. And the way that he did it shows just how smart he is and how also how studious he is, because he has to be very, very smart with the animals that he chooses because uh, whatever he eats, he has to know their abilities, obviously. The reason why he's so slept on to me is because, yeah, he's basically Beast Boy in the sense that he can basically control the powers of every single animal in the animal kingdom. But what makes him way better than Beast Boy or any other person that can transform into animals is that he can just choose the like abilities of the specific animals and use multiple of those abilities at the same time. And that basically brings me to the question of if he was able to turn, well, first of all, if he was cannibalistic in a sense and he was able to kind of take body parts or maybe even like just not body parts but even strands of hair maybe because that still contains DNA of a person, I guess. um would he be able to use their quirks just off of their hair? Like, let's say Vigilante Deku decides to give him a piece and lock of his hair just to keep in his utility belt. Could he just whip that out and then all of a sudden he has the powers for one for all for that moment until he has to take a shit because like the power runs out after it passes through his digestive tract. So like, yeah, that's the only way his power goes out. um would he be able to do that? I don't think his body would be able to handle it, or would it be? Because it technically would have one for all. It's a lot of technicalities to it. But let's just say the reasoning why he's called the Sun Eater is a very, very accurate name because technically, if he were to eat the sun, he could manifest parts of the sun on his body and become like a human torch. I mean, it might combust his internal organs, but if he also ate someone else with the quirk that was like invincible, you can see how this guy can be just so overpowered and he's just extremely slept on. I thought he was a lot underused in the last arc. I can't even remember if he even showed up, but I think he was with them in the raid, but I don't remember him like fighting an opponent like as very prominent as he should be, being a top 3 student in UA. Uh, but yeah, what do you guys think? You think Tamaki Amajiki is properly rated? Do you feel like you should have seen more of him? If he is a top 3 student, for me personally, I feel like we should see more. The same goes for Nejiri. I mean, we've seen some more stuff with Lemillion. But yeah, it seems like people are just sleeping on him. Stop sleeping on Tamaki Yamajiki.